if the economy collapsed tomorrow and I had no money in my bank account,
Yeah.
my
Could you
food
survive?
stores, right? My food stores are relatively small. I have some
Yeah.
chickens. I
Yeah.
have enough property. I could grow a garden,
You are
right?
better off than most people, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot of food stores and things could go bad really, really quickly. And
Yeah.
how would I protect my chickens from my neighbors?
Yeah.
When
Right.
when food is scarce, people become quite
Oh,
violent
yes. Oh,
in
yes.
order to survive.
You got
Uh,
guns? Can you shoot well? Because,
right,
right? This is
right.
what it's going to come to.
Welcome to another edition of the Bloomburg Democrat. I'm Sally Taylor. This is my charming younger brother, John Daniels. And we are here to talk about collectivism versus individualism
Mm.
culturally. So, John, this was
Mm.
kind of the topic that you picked. How do
Yes.
you understand the difference between these two concepts?
Yes. So, the reason I thought about this topic is because I grew up in the US and collectivism is almost like a forbidden word, right? Everybody thinks collectivism is the devil. And I came to a country that is like unabashedly collectivist. And things are so much better here, in my opinion. Like, there's no crime. People are nice. Everything's clean. And so I had so many questions as to why this place that's supposed to be so wrong is so right. And I kind of realized that like in the United States, there's actually a whole lot of collectivists, and they just don't realize that they're being a collectivist society. They think they're individualists through and through, and yet so many people are super collectivist. And so I thought about like religions, right? You have all the different Christian religions as well as non-Christian religions, but particularly I thought of the Christian religions and how like you're Baptists and they're a group and they're super like into themselves. And you get the Mormons and they're super into themselves, and the Methodists super into themselves, and the Catholics. Everybody's like really into their group. And if you're not in our group, you're wrong. And if you are, you're all right. Right. And so this
Right.
is a very collectivist idea. Like, and then you think about like schools in general, like grade school, high school, or whatever. You have your little cliques. Everybody is so individual, and yet they are like collecting themselves into these little groups. And I just thought, wow, they're all so collectivist. That's kind of
I,
my take on it.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to think about. And I knew that because you have both lived in the US and Japan, that you would be very aware of
Mhm.
that shift and the differences on a cultural basis. Because yes, the United States is often called a very individualistic society. And in a lot of ways, there's good evidence for that.
Oh,
But
yes,
we wouldn't have roads if we were purely individualistic,
that's
right?
right. That's right. That's
Um,
right.
so you mentioned a few things like religion, and
Mhm.
I'll add in things like party affiliation and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And of course, ideally, we would like to think that they are collectivist, but I subdivide into collectivism and, for me, tribalism.
Mhm.
And they're very closely related concepts,
They definitely
but
are.
there are some differences, right?
Right.
Do you, what do you see as the differences between collectivism and tribalism?
Hmm. Well, I think tribalism may be a little bit more like animosity towards other groups that are not your own, right? I
Right.
think that would be the big difference. Yeah, it's just kind of it's us versus them, right?
Yeah, and that's the way I understand it as well, that
Mm.
collectivism can still embrace people with differences,
Yes.
which is what the American society originally was intended to be, right?
Right.
We talk about
Definitely.
the American melting pot,
Exactly.
but that's also a big difference between the United States and Japan, Japan is still, I mean, not completely, but relatively homogenized in its population.
Well, yes, this is definitely true. And this is something that a lot of people often point to when they want to downplay the the benefits of Japanese society. Oh, they're just so homogenous in this, and that's why they don't have any problems. Yeah, that's true to a degree, but Japan is extremely accepting of foreign ideas. Japan is, I think, more of a melting pot in a way, like a cultural melting pot, perhaps more than other places. I had a teacher in junior high school who would say, "Oh, I don't like to call America a melting pot. It's more of a salad bowl because like you mix all the parts together, but they kind of stay a little bit separate, right? Like you have your if you go to New York, for example, you have, there's Little Italy, there's Little Tokyo, there's Chinatown, You've got all your different little subcultures that are kind of neatly divided. And so that was her thought. But in Japan, they don't really do that very much. Like they find something that they like, and then they cling on to it and they start doing it. And so they have Christmas here, and it's completely different from what it is in the United States. Here, like the big thing is you have a Christmas cake, which is just kind of like a cake, and you have fried chicken instead of like turkey or whatever, I guess. But everybody goes and they have fried chicken, and it's mostly KFC. But you see like hamburger restaurants that for Christmas they serve chicken because everybody's trying to get in on this big, you know, gold
Fried
run,
chicken. So
this big
what
gold
is
rush.
it? Why fried chicken? What is it about chicken? I wonder.
I think it's just like the absence of turkey and the
Okay.
the image. I don't know. And so like, but it's not just Christmas either. They have Valentine's Day here, and then they have the other side of Valentine's Day that we just don't have in the US, but I guess maybe they have it other places. It's called White Day, which is so Valentine's Day is for when girls give chocolates to boys, and then White Day is when boys give chocolates to girls, right? So it's like a little bit of balance there.
Yeah.
And but they also do like Halloween a little bit. It's not like quite like it is in the US, and nobody really goes door to door. But of course they do like the cosplay. They dress up, they do costumes and stuff. And then it's mostly schools will have like little events where kids come and they get candy and stuff. But I mean, they just kind of take everything that they like from other cultures and they just kind of wrap it all together into Japanese culture. And it's like this everywhere, and it's quite
Right.
deep.
I was going to say that's why I see Japan as being a truly collective society, and much of Asia it seems to function that way because
Yeah.
there is an inclusiveness along with that.
Mm.
And while we certainly have to have some of that to function as a society in the United States, I feel like we have a lot more tribalism than we do
Mm.
collectivism.
Yes.
And tribalism does have sort of a less evolved aspect to it because there's
That's it.
always
Mm.
creating others, right, that are not in
Yes.
the group.
Yes. It's certainly less kind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's a almost an aspect of victimhood attached to it.
Oh,
Like
yes.
our group is always being attacked by everybody else,
Hmm.
whether
Yeah.
that's true or not. And sometimes it might be, and sometimes it might not be.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
but it
Certainly some
helps,
groups are attacked. Certainly.
yes. But it definitely does create more division
Oh, yes. It definitely
within the
does.
society.
Yeah.
We were raised, in the Mormon religion,
Yeah.
and it was a great upbringing, but there was always the sense that
Well,
you're
you're the
separate.
chosen. Yeah. You're the
Yeah.
chosen ones, and nobody else is, and everybody else is going to hell. And so we have to, you know, bring them to heaven along with us.
Proselytize, right?
Yes. You got to help save everybody.
Right, right.
Right.
And
Right.
so, but there was a victimhood sort of associated with that as
Oh,
well.
yes.
That
Definitely.
sense of always being persecuted.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is more indicative of more tribalistic organizations, and it certainly
Yeah.
tribalism can be based around religion, political party, race, general culture, or norms. Families even can be very tribal,
Yeah.
in nature.
Yeah.
Historically, we have the Hatfields and the McCoys, right, who were
Exactly.
fighting for generations,
Right.
for apparently no reason.
Yeah. Exactly.
um, when I think about these concepts of individualism versus collectivism, and we haven't really talked about individualism much yet.
No, yes,
Um,
exactly. I was thinking, so what's individualism, right?
right,
What is
right,
that?
right. Well, and that's a good question. So, America is often looked at as a very individualistic society. We pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? And we
Hmm.
make something of ourselves.
Right.
And that's considered a very individual process.
Hmm.
And to some degree, it has served us well. That sense of, independence and individuation has
Hmm.
given us a lot of opportunity for creativity
Hmm.
and thinking outside the box. That may be
Hmm.
one of the areas where collectivism fails a little bit.
Yeah, what you're saying in the spirit of what you're saying, I think that's true. Like certainly here in Japan, like creativity is sorely lacking on many fronts. Uh, they just have a hard time coming up with original ideas. However, I really enjoy open source software and that whole idea of information should be free. And there's a very strong idea of we're all riding on the shoulders of giants, kind of, or I don't know, what's the correct way of saying that? But
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
we're all building on the work of other people. And so no man is an island, right? Everything that we have done, everything that we've made is because people have come before us and they've done the things that we're now building upon. And so I have a hard time even seeing individualism as truly being an individualist. Like, if you're not living in the forest by yourself and cutting down trees to build a log cabin and have your own garden and stuff like that, are you really an individualist? I kind of think you're not. I think I can truly accept the notion of individualism by the modern definition. I just don't think that's individualism myself.
Well, we're so completely interdependent on each other. If the economy collapsed tomorrow and I had no money in my bank account,
Yeah.
my
Could you
food
survive?
stores, all right, my food stores are relatively small. I have some
Yeah.
chickens. I
Yeah.
have enough property. I could grow a garden,
You are
right?
better off than most people, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot of food stores, and things could go bad really, really quickly. And
Yeah.
how would I protect my chickens from my neighbors?
Yeah.
When
Right.
when food is scarce, people become quite
Oh,
violent
yes. Oh,
in
yes.
order to survive.
You got
Uh,
guns? Can you shoot well? Because,
right,
right? This is
right.
what it's going to come to.
And I mean,
Yeah.
personally, because I don't believe in physical death, for me is not the end. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I would personally rather die
Yeah. Yeah.
than
Yeah.
start shooting my neighbors, right, for food.
Well, yes, I agree with you on that. I personally, I would not rather die than shoot my neighbors if the neighbors are trying to shoot me.
Right.
But
Uh,
but I agree with you in spirit, yes. Like I
yeah.
think we should work together instead of
Yeah.
trying to kill each other for a couple
And
chickens. Chickens won't
and
last.
right, they won't last.
No.
And we are so interdependent.
Oh
And
yes.
we're wired that way. We're not meant
Oh
to be
yes.
alone as human beings,
No, no, no. We're
right?
social creatures. That's
Yes.
right.
So I have another question for you.
Mm.
What about the person who doesn't fit in with the group?
Mm.
What about the person who either doesn't fit in the tribe, which is the worst case scenario, or
Yeah.
even doesn't fit in with the collective?
Well, they're
Where
probably
does
the
that
true
person go?
individualists, first of all. They're
Yeah.
probably going to be fine without the rest of you people. Right? I don't
Right.
know. What do we do with those
Because that
people?
always is a problem, right?
Yeah.
Even like in religion. if you can't fit into the religion, you're
Yeah.
very quickly ostracized, or you find your
Yeah.
own way out, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Because it's not
Well,
comfortable.
yes, I think it comes down to whether or not these people are like violently antisocial or just kind of quiet enough on their own, right? Because if they're quiet enough on their own, just leave them alone. But if they're trying to actively harm other people, you kind of have to
Right.
take care of them in one way or
Then the
another.
collective makes decisions, which is why,
Yeah,
we have things
yeah,
like prisons and justice
exactly,
systems.
exactly.
So I often look at whether or not someone considers themselves and more of an individualist or more of a collectiveness, with another layer of, are they more introverted or are they more extroverted?
Hmm.
And I don't know that these correlate as closely as I'm thinking about,
Hmm.
but one of the reasons I've always looked at myself as a little more individualist than collectiveness is that I have been one of those people who hasn't fit in well, right?
Would you say
With
you're more introverted or extroverted?
I'm by far more introverted,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so when, especially growing up as a kid, people told me that, oh, I was quirky, or I, marched to my own drum beat, or that there was all
Mhm.
kinds of things that they said about me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I didn't fully fit in a lot of ways. And I relate that to my introversion and my kind of natural artistic temperament. But it was painful
Yeah.
growing up,
Yeah.
and not fitting in. I
Yeah.
always had a couple of good friends,
Mm.
always,
Yeah.
that I felt like I could really interact with closely. But when it
Hmm.
came to the group, not so much.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I live in a world that I rely on everybody else just as much as anybody
Yes.
does.
Yes. Yes. That's true.
So
That's
how do
true.
you see that? How do you understand, because there's another way to look at it.
Mm.
Individualism can also be a version of egoism, right? Or almost
Mm.
narcissism.
Yes.
And I've questioned myself many times throughout my life. Is the way that I see the world narcissistic in nature? God, I
Yes.
hope not. You're right. Because
Right.
that's
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
think of that as being a more toxic way of being, but I've
Exactly.
also not fit in all the time.
Yeah.
So what does
Well,
the individual do when they don't fit in?
that's a good question. Because I'm similar to you. I've never fit in that well. I've never really cared to, I don't think. Well, there's a quote that I can't quite remember specifically, but it's along the lines of what good is to fit in society or to go along with society when society is sick. There's what's this saying?
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. I do know. Gosh, give me a second, John. Maybe I'll have to add it as a quote in
There we
here.
go.
But about it
Man,
being something
getting
along
old
the
is
active,
terrible, isn't it?
it's horrible. But I do know the quote you're referring to,
Yeah,
and I'll
yeah.
find
So,
it
anyways,
and I'll
so
post it in the video.
okay, okay. So that
Okay.
quote right there is probably like down here
Yeah.
somewhere, right? So that quote, with the measure of fitting in with society when society is ill or something like that,
Right.
like that's kind of just how I've always thought of things. Is like I don't want to do what these people are doing. It's weird. It's like I don't think that's the right way to do things.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to do that, right? So I've just
Yeah.
always kind of been a little matter-of-factly about it and just like, well, that's not for me. And maybe the whole like victimized Mormon ordeal that we also grew up in kind of had something to do with that because I was already kind of like under this impression like nobody likes me because I'm a Mormon in Texas.
Right.
And I've had people like stand up in class and like the Mormons are all going to hell and blah blah blah. I was like, what the? Who is this guy and what's he talking about? And so I mean,
Yeah.
there's been a bit of like not fitting in, like really obvious to me. And then there was just the whole part where I didn't understand what other people were thinking half the time. So I don't know. For me, it's always just kind of been, I'm a leaf in the wind. I go wherever the wind blows me and I adapt, right? That's just kind of how I've lived my entire life. I adapt to the situation at hand and I go wherever I go. And
Yeah.
it's been fine.
Yeah. That's that. And I agree. That's kind of the way I look at it as well, in that I have found myself okay with a lot of alone time, but I've also found it okay to meet people where they are.
Hmm.
And by that, I mean, not everybody is going to think the way that I think. And not
Exactly.
everybody wants to make their own choices.
Hmm.
Some people are actually very happy to have the group make their choice for them. And so that's another interesting thing about the difference between collectivism or tribalism and, a very independent, individualistic way of being.
Hmm.
Because the group very often gives up choice for the group. They give up their personal choice for the benefit of the group.
I wonder though if they're giving it up for the benefit of the group. I think that is something that's much more deeply ingrained. I don't think it's like a mostly awareness. There's no awareness of there of like, I'm going to do this for the better of the group. I don't think that's really what it is. I think
Do you
that, yeah, I
think it's
mean,
because it's trained out at a young age?
is it trained out or is it just something that never existed or culturally, right? It was just never something that was instilled or what? I don't know. But
Yeah.
I th I don't think it's like I don't think it's a willful act. I'm sure that there are people who in this life they decide I'm going to do this very difficult thing for the betterment of society, right? Definitely people like that exist. Is that the average person who's just kind of going along with the group? I don't think so, right? Those people, I think, are maybe not thinking about things they should be thinking about. And it's easy, when you're super busy and you're swamped with work, you're swamped with your family, you got so much going on. It's way easier to just kind of like do the same thing that everybody else is doing and not think about anything because you're exhausted than it is to have to make choices that might change your own life or the lives of others or the world.
And then I question, why are we so exhausted? you
Oh
know,
my,
bec-
yeah,
because we allow ourselves to say, this is the way life is,
right,
right? And
right,
this is what I'm responsible for. And certainly being
exactly.
responsible, part of being part of a culture and part of a society, there is
Yep,
responsibility with that.
yeah,
Uh, and so I don't think that we can live without both individualism and collectivism.
yeah,
Probably we can live without tribalism, because
yeah,
again, I see tribalism as a lower version of collectivism, a
yeah,
less
basically, yeah,
evolved version, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but we're seeing so much tribalism in the United States these days.
Mm,
It's everywhere. It's religion, it's politics, it's where you're from, it's north
mhm.
versus south, East Coast versus West Coast. You
Yeah,
know, we
yeah,
divide ourselves in so many ways and then
hmm,
expect to be able to work together. The other really interesting thing, and I think this is human nature, is it's scary to be too individualistic.
what do you mean?
In that you can't really survive. We are human. We are meant to be
Mm,
collective in nature, supportive in nature, and the individual often, especially if they're extrasized from the group,
hmm,
they historically don't survive, right? If
right,
you are a member of a small tribe in America during the early
pre-colonial
prehistory
times.
times, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, if you're told to leave the group, you may well not survive.
Yeah, basically a death sentence, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And so I feel like it's human nature to group ourselves and to
yeah,
find those that we fit in with,
yeah, yeah, that's true.
because our survival does depend on it.
Yes.
So, have we come to any conclusions, John?
I think if anyone is truly like an individualist, I think it's probably the sovereign citizens. And they're ridiculed left and right. But I kind of get some of their ideas. However, I think they're really kind of just painting targets on their backs because if you rock the boat, then you're going to get tossed out, right?
Mm.
So, yeah, if you're going to really be a sovereign citizen, you have to kind of try to fly under the radar, right? Fly under the radar, don't make waves, do your own thing, but also try to just look like you're doing what everybody else is doing. So that's kind of how I live my life in Japan. Like, because I am a bit more of an individualist and I live in a very collective society. And so I try to follow the rules that are like, obviously, if I'm not following these rules, then like it sticks out. Those are the rules you got to follow. But then otherwise, as long as you kind of keep them to yourself and just doing what you want to do, nobody really cares. So that's the same thing everywhere. And so if you want to be an individualist, that's cool, but don't rock the boat. Keep society
There's a
happy.
limit, right?
Right.
There's a limit,
Right. I mean,
and
we're
that's
people.
why yeah, and that's why I think it's important to have both.
Yeah.
Collectivism, when I look at a definition of collectivism, it talks about accepting, you know, other groups as as part of the group.
Yes, yes,
That
yes. Live
is
and let
the
live.
yes, and
Yeah.
that at least initially was sort of the American premise,
Yes,
right?
yes, it was.
That people could come in from all over, worship any way they wanted to worship,
That's
you
right.
know, just
There's no state religion. Everything is welcome,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
And
exactly.
yeah, like that is the basis of the United States is live and let
Right,
live, right?
right.
Kind of a libertarian type thing. I'm
But
okay
we
with
haven't
that.
quite lived up to it.
No, we have not. We love to tell each other what to do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's terrible. We
Human
need to
nature,
just,
perhaps.
yeah, we gotta just let people do what they're gonna do and understand, hey, that's them, and I'm gonna do this, right? For me, the most important rules are the rules you make for yourself. Like those are the ones that matter. Those are the ones you're gonna follow. So you just gotta think like, what's a good rule for me to live, right? And then try to do that.
Which is a very individualistic way of
Yeah,
thinking. So, with that said, John, thank you
yeah.
again for a fascinating conversation.
Oh,
We've
you're very
raised some
welcome.
questions,
I don't know if we answered
and
any.
I'm not sure we answered any either because it's
Nope.
such a complex topic.
Yes, it is. And it's a short
People have
time,
spent their
so
lives thinking
think
about,
about it. Exactly.
yeah,
Just got to think
yeah,
about it.
exactly. All
Think about
right.
it. Try to apply it and
Yes. And
just try
for
to be better,
me,
right?
that's allowing people to both be themselves while still being included
Yeah,
and still being supported.
exactly.
We're working on it. We'll learn.
Yeah, we're working on it.
If you enjoyed this content, please hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.